Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and today's show is on Senator Joseph Raymond McCarthy, a Catholic from Wisconsin, a crusader against communism and all things perverse. And we're going to show how he was right and how what we see today is all those who came out to attack him. And we welcome Brother Alexis to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me back on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure to be on this radio station, which is breaking ground in independent Catholic media and in the English-speaking world, and just telling the whole truth and grabbing that third rail almost on every episode. And this is going to be a great episode. I grew up in the 60s, the 70s. McCarthy's name was still being floated around, but he was just like completely vilified. And I never really knew why. And I'd have to say, until today, I hadn't read his biography to really know how viciously this man was attacked, how righteous he was in his cause, and how he was a prophet in his day. And if America had only listened to him, but the little he did do perhaps gave us an extra 50 years of liberty in America. Now we see the whole thing going the way he warned it would go. A great man, a great Catholic, and all you out there who wonder why America is just going absolutely bonkers politically, how we're in open Marxist revolution and no one does anything about it. McCarthy's life will explain it. It didn't begin yesterday, okay? This has been the Masonic plan a long time.
Yep, so let us tell you something about Senator Joseph McCarthy.
Okay, when was he born? Where is he from?
He was born on a farm in the town of Grand Chute near Appleton, Wisconsin on November 15th, 1908. He attended the Underhill School, a one-room schoolhouse where he completed 8th grade. Bored with farm work, McCarthy started his own chicken business as a teenager, but disease wiped out his flock. Broke at age 20. He worked as a clerk in the Appleton grocery store, quickly becoming manager. In 1929, McCarthy was transferred to Manawa to manage a new grocery store. While there, he entered Little Wolf High School, completing the 4-year curriculum in 9 months. McCarthy's excellent grades enabled him to attend Marquette University in Milwaukee, which he entered in the fall of 1930. In school, he coached boxing, was elected president of his law school class, all while working a series of part-time jobs. Immediately after gaining his law degree in 1935, McCarthy opened a practice in Wapak. He later joined a law firm in Shawanoa, becoming a partner in 1937.
Okay, I just want to make some comments here. This guy grew up on the farm. Often, the image that McCarthy is given is normally of a city guy. He's not. He's a farm boy. At the age of 14, he dropped out of junior high to help his parents save the farm. How many young men would do that today? And then for 6 years, he didn't go to school. And then 1 year, he made up 6 years of education in 9 months in high school. That's how intelligent this guy was. He went to the University of the home farm. And is that kind of a surprising character, AJ? You grew up on the farm.
Not really. I mean, it was normal back then around here and where he grew up. And I mean, back then you learned more on the farm and working in the books, and also if you had to create a piece of equipment to help do something on the farm, you he just did it. It just, um, I could remember stories of one of my uncles, great uncles on my dad's side, and like, oh, we needed a certain piece of equipment to help mow or farm or something, so they didn't go out and buy it. They went to the shop and made it. That's how they were back then. They were just brilliant.
Took the initiative, used the creativity, applied the thought. A lot of character in this youth, because how many dropouts from high school become U.S. senators? And he really achieved a lot in his life, and he started his law practice, but that's not where his career ended. He went on to what?
Yeah. To McCarthy's first attempt at public office was unsuccessful run for the post of Shawano District Attorney as a Democrat in 1936. In 1939, he sought the nonpartisan post of judge in the 10th Judicial Circuit, covering Lad, Shinano, and Outagamie counties. He campaigned tirelessly, defeating the incumbent judge, who had served for 24 years. At the age of 30, McCarthy became the youngest circuit judge ever elected in Wisconsin. Wow.
And we're going to see that in his political careers, he was outstanding. One thing as a circuit judge, and this is an amazing thing. Remember, he's a Catholic. He was a practicing Catholic, but in the U.S. there was already civil divorce, and the people getting divorced were not Catholics. Okay, because in that age, Catholics didn't get divorced. And his concern was for the kids, so he cleared a docket that had all these cases of divorce in it, so that the children would get their help timely and their families wouldn't be in limbo. And that is a great sign of prudence. You recognize that the moral law, what they're doing is wrong, but nevertheless, since these people don't have a concept of marriage that we Catholics do, the children, the natural law, the rights of the children should be brought to fore. And that's not to consent to divorce. That is to understand that some things are more important. Okay, people who don't believe in marriage aren't married. Okay, that's the Catholic notion. So that's not where he ended. He didn't. This is where he gets his character to be an investigator, to look at facts, to handle cases. We see he's a hard worker. This is a man who worked. He didn't sit around wasting time. Okay, so he wins this office. What does he go on to?
Okay, he borrowed some money to make a down payment on a house at 1508 Lorraine Court in Appleton, not far from his new office at the Outagamie County Courthouse. As a judge, McCarthy was credited with being hardworking and fair, but he also rebuked the Wisconsin Supreme Court for an abuse of judicial authority after destroying court records. He is later censured for violating an ethical code that prohibited sitting judges from running for non-judicial posts. What did he do?
I think he attempted to run for office, you know.
Yeah. Then July 1942, shortly after the start of World War II, McCarthy took a leave of absence from his judicial office and was commissioned as a first lieutenant in the Marines, as an intelligence officer stationed in the Pacific. He participated in combat bombing missions, although it says he was not wounded in action, but he wasn't he?
Well, no, he wasn't wounded in action. The first time he went to Pacific during a party, he broke a leg. Okay, so he did break it during the war, but he didn't break it in action. He ends up with the epitaph Tail Gunner Joe. And I want to talk about this because this is one thing that the Marxists attack him on, saying that that was a made-up title, but wasn't. He did serve as a tail gunner on 14 combat missions. And he was awarded the Distinguished Flyingman's Cross by the Marines, okay? And they try to make it out to be a lie. It's not a lie. And though he participated in 14 missions in person on the plane, he was an intelligence officer for his air unit. And so he participated in many more missions on the ground because he had to plan them. And so this is not a false epithet. And if the Marine Corps decided to give him the award, which normally required 39 missions or 32 missions, when he only had 14, that's a decision of the Marine Corps. That's not fraud. So you're going to see in the entire life of McCarthy, they attempted to attack him on everything and twist the truth involved in revisionism. And we'll talk about this at the end. When you use the Wikipedia articles, just absolutely full of lies. So, but one thing I want to point out, as judge, he was immune from the draft, but he volunteered anyhow.
Yep.
Now, that's not at all like the Bushes. The Bushes got some way out and never went to war. Both of them, draft dodgers. Trump was never drafted. I don't think. No, I don't think he was eligible.
He had a medically excusable because they didn't want people with bone spurs.
Oh, okay. Well, how many people would even know there's an exemption for bone spurs? Okay.
Not many.
Not many. So this guy is above and beyond the duty, supererogation here, above and beyond duty. And we're going to see this as a character in McCarthy's life, which is a sign of great virtue, above and beyond the duty. This guy wasn't a man interested in little things. He was a man interested in doing great deeds.
Yeah. While still on active duty in 1944, McCarthy challenged incumbent Alexander Wiley for the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate, but was suddenly defeated. In April 1945, having resigned his military commission, McCarthy was reelected without opposition to the circuit court. He immediately began planning for the 1946 Senate campaign. And then we go on to where he becomes senator.
So right out of the war and then right into the Senate, I guess he saw that something had to be done, the way things would be conducted. We're going to see now that McCarthy, the Catholic, will end up in the Senate and realize that what's going on in the U.S. government is complete fraud. And you'll see the whole system turn on him. Now, this is something that now in 2020 we can see as complete fraud. And people are beginning to wake up to it. But he saw it way back in 1950, which is 70 years ago. So I said this guy's a prophet. So let's talk about his senatorial campaign career.
Initially, McCarthy was given little chance of defeating incumbent Robert M. La Follette Jr. for the Republican Senate nomination. La Follette was son of the famous Fighting Bob La Follette, was well known in Wisconsin, having served as senator for 21 years. But La Follette had only recently rejoined the Republican Party after years as leader of the Progressive Party. Ooh. Commie.
Marxist, yeah.
And many Republicans resented his return. Aided by the support of the Republican organization, McCarthy ran a typically energetic campaign and beat La Follette by a tiny margin. In the general election, McCarthy easily defeated his Democrat opponent and went to Washington at age 38, youngest member of the new Senate.
Let's point out, so every time you read the history of McCarthy, they're always jabbing him. He barely won his nomination. No, it doesn't matter whether you barely won your nomination or not. It's whether you've done in the election. He won the election 61.2% to 37.3%. That's a landslide. He walloped the other guy. And why don't they point that out? No, they don't point that out because they're always hitting the guy. But La Follette, the Progressive Party, is a Marxist party. And he switched parties to the Republican because why? What was going on in the 30s and the 40s was the Marxists were infiltrating parties and then switching their parties, pretending they're becoming mainline Republican. So both parties by now are already infiltrated by the Marxists. And McCarthy is going to find out that by actually joining the political system that's supposed to be democratic. and supposed to be
Hmm.
American. He finds it's quite otherwise already.
Yeah.
So he gets to the Senate, and what does he do?
Now we see McCarthy for what he's going to become. As a senator, McCarthy's voting record was generally conservative, although he did not follow the Republican Party line. The main accomplishments of his first years came with a successful fight for housing legislation and his work to ease sugar rationing. You want to talk about the sugar?
Yeah, I'll talk about the sugar. So for the communists, this is an unpardonable crime. He stopped sugar rationing. You know, they've been on sugar for a long time because the communist mayor of New York City now, he's actually, the two of them, reduced the amount of sugar you can have in your foods because sugar is evil. Abortion is okay and sodomy is fine, even without a mask on, but sugar is evil. And they
Mm-hmm.
try to smear him in his campaign because he got a personal loan from a Pepsi bottling executive. Well, you know, what a Pepsi bottling executive does with his personal money is his own business, okay? But people don't drink Pepsi because there's sugar in it. They drink it because it's a nice drink, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, but they try to demonize him because of that. The other thing is, when he ran as a senator, he got support from a union. And you never hear the Democrats call unions Marxist institutions. Oh, no, you're Democrats supported by the unions. They're not Marxists. They're American workers. But this one union supported McCarthy, and in the Wikipedia article, that they were communists. And see, he was supported by communists. They spent a whole article saying he falsely accuses other people of being communists, and they accused the whole union of thousands of members of being communists
Mm-hmm.
because they supported McCarthy, because McCarthy's evil and therefore you must be a communist or a fascist. He's accused of both things in the article. He's both a communist and a fascist. How can that be? I don't know. But what
Mm-hmm.
it means is he's anti-Masonic and anti-Democrat.
Yeah. All right. After that, the biggest national issue at the time was the suspicion of communist infiltration of the United States government following in a series of investigations and espionage trials. McCarthy engaged the issue on February 9, 1950, in a speech before the Republican Women's Group in Wheeling, West Virginia. In an address, McCarthy charged that U.S. Secretary of State Dean Atkinson knew of 205 communists in the State Department. Later, McCarthy claimed to have the names of 57 State Department communists and called for an investigation.
Okay, let's put the thing on now. So what AJ just read would be the standard stock description of what happened. Now I'm going to point out how that is a completely revisionist statement. Because why? The list he had in his hand was a list from the State Department, who previously had investigated their own people. They had investigated 287. They had found that 79 were communist agents and had to resign. 205 were suspected, okay? So the head of the State Department did know he had communist spies in the agency. So McCarthy wasn't making this up. It was actually a declassified document from the State Department or something from some fellow American in the State Department gave to him. So he wasn't claiming it or alleging it. This is it were the facts. And to this day, they claim it's claimed and alleged, or he made it up, and they play with names. Now, obviously, in the list of 287 people, not everyone's going to be charged in the same way. So there's different ways of classifying it. Some more or less agents, some more or less under suspicion, some are more or less untrustworthy. So you can rephrase that number in many different ways in different speeches, depending on what criteria you're talking about. And this is what they use to attack him for making it up. So the statement you just read is complete Marxist revisionism, okay?
Yeah.
The truth is that on February 9th, 1950, on a Lincoln Day speech to the Republican Women's Club of Wheeling, West Virginia, with a list in his hand that was declassified from the State Department, he talked about a previous investigation that they had undertook in which they had found 79 spies in their own State Department among a list of numerous people who are suspected, and they knew about it and quietly dismissed people. So the accusation of McCarthy was not false. And even to this day on the Wikipedia article, it says, in quotes, enemies within. It wasn't quotes, it was enemies within, and they were in the State Department. And McCarthy didn't make this up, and he didn't allege it, and he didn't claim it. He was reading an actual document of the State Department. So let's put the truth of the history back together now. You just heard the history that no one has ever told you, and we're going to tell. We told it to you, and you're not going to find it because they rewrite it.
Yeah.
You'll see this in the Wikipedia article. They'll attack McCarthy, and then at the end of the sub-article, they'll point out that it was in fact true what he did. Then they'll attack him, and then they'll point out, and they're always accusing him of something, and then they put a little footnote there that shows that the accusation is completely false. And so what causes the stir now is he gave this speech, and there was no cameras or recordings there. But it impressed the women. You know, women are very impressionable. It impressed the women a lot, and the word got out, and this has caused a media frenzy.
And I have some quotes from this by other people, by other senators. In 1950, the same year that Senator Joseph McCarthy claimed 205 communists were working in the State Department, Truman's Undersecretary of State, John Purifoy, said that the State Department had allowed 91 homosexuals to resign. On April 19, 1950, the Republican National Chairman Guy George Gabrielson said that perhaps as dangerous as the actual communists are the sexual perverts who have infiltrated our government in recent years. Gabrielson charged that the media was not doing enough to alert the population to the homosexual menace.
The number of 205 people under investigation in the State Department was affirmed in a 1946 letter from the then Secretary of State James Burns to Congressman Adolph J. Sabath. And that in that letter, he said that the State Department had begun investigations in recommendation against employment for 284 persons. 79 of these had been removed from their jobs. 205 still were on the State Department's payroll. So this was not made up. McCarthy wasn't inventing this at all. It was 4-year-old information. How else would a junior senator get information? Yeah. It would just be, he found out what was going on and he decided to speak about it.
Whoa. To tie this in with yesterday's show, there's an FBI agent named Robert E. Lee who had this information too.
Yeah, and aided McCarthy. So here we see that a descendant of Robert E. Lee was aiding Senator McCarthy. And McCarthy was not partisan. He was a Republican, but when he starts his investigation, who's his chief counsel? Robert Kennedy of the Kennedy family. The Kennedy family were Democrats, hardcore Democrats, but they supported him in what he was doing. Why? Because they were both Catholics and they realized the threat to America of the communists, okay, and of the perverse moral underworld.
Yeah.
And this is not a war so much against Americans and communists. This is a war between Catholics and the Freemasonic establishment, and that's why they all turned on McCarthy, just as later they would engineer the assassination of Robert Kennedy and John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was a battle that went on 17 years.
Yeah. And the second quote is from a Nebraska GOP Senator Kenneth Weary, concluded in December. You cannot hardly separate homosexuals from subversives. Mind you, I don't say that every homosexual is a subversive. And I don't say every subversive is a homosexual. But people of low morality are a menace in the government. Whatever they are all tied up together. In 1950, a Senate investigation chaired by Clyde R. Huey noted in a report, it is generally believed that those who engage in overall acts of perversion lack the emotional stability of normal persons, and said that all of the government's intelligence agencies are in complete agreement that sex perverts in government constitute security risks.
Yeah. So McCarthy will begin two campaigns: one to get rid of communist agents, and then one to get rid of security risks.
Mm-hmm.
And part of his effort with the U.S. government will dismiss 5,000 homosexuals from federal service.
Yeah.
Now, that might seem a small number today if compared to government workers, because there's hundreds of thousands of them. But back in the 50s, there were not that many government workers. So the gays had already made an intent pursuit to take over the US government, even in the 50s. And this is why he is so viciously attacked by the entire media establishment, which was already by the 50s controlled by the homos and the gays, and still is. And so because he was not making up these things. He just ran right square into them as a senator. They were right there in front of him. It was just all over the government. And so the enemies within speech wasn't made up. There were enemies within. Truman, as president, had made an alliance with communist Russia. Instead of letting Hitler destroy Russia and then conquering Germany and therefore liberating Russia and giving them back an orthodox government, no, we sided with a government that oppressed the Russian people and had murdered 20 million Ukrainians by starving them to death. Truman's government and Roosevelt's government funded the communist Chinese that killed 120 million Chinese people. And we gave them all our military hardware in 1946.
Yeah.
So let's not pretend that there weren't communists in the US government. The Democrats were already a communist supporting party if they were not communists themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the worst betrayal of America. And it didn't start with the COVID lockdown.
Yeah.
It didn't start with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. Now, 1953, it all began because then Republicans take control of the Senate, and McCarthy becomes the chairman of the Committee on the Government Operations and the subcommittee chairman on the investigations. And this is what happens in the spring, April 27th, 1953, by executive order 10450, signed by President Dwight Eisenhower. Any criminal, infamous, dishonest, immoral, notoriously disgraced conduct, habitual use of intoxicants to excess, drug addiction, or sexual perversion. And that is where approximately 5,000 homosexuals were fired from federal jobs, including private contractors and military personnel.
And we have to remember that in the 50s, they didn't distinguish. So by homosexuals, they're including also pedophiles, transsexuals, transvestites, and all those other perversions, okay? So it's not surprising that the pedo elites of the world today are still pushing the same politics and the same divisionism, and why they hate McCarthy to this day. This article at Wikipedia is just hate from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
And he got wonderful support from the Kennedy family. They were always his allies, even when it came to the vote against him in the Senate. Senator Kennedy did not vote, and McCarthy was not an anti-Semite. One of his chief secretaries was a Jew, okay, a Cohen. So they tried to claim that McCarthy was pro-Nazi because he wanted a pardon for SS soldiers who had been involved in an atrocity in Belgium during the Ardennes offensive. But he wanted a pardon for them because the trial had judicial misconduct in it, and it wasn't a fair trial. The people who are anti-McCarthy people, they try to make it out that he was a Nazi. Well, how could he be a Nazi if a communist union supported him for office? So, you know, they're conflicted in their claims. They claim both sides. Yeah, we never talk about the Democratic Party supporting two communist regimes that together kill more than 180 million people. No, of course you can't talk about that. There's nothing wrong with killing 180 million people, only if defending a few Waffen SS.
Yeah. So in the fall of 1953, we get the famous Army McCarthy hearings. And it was to investigate the Army Signal Corps. And here it says it failed to uncover the alleged espionage ring. Was that true?
It failed to uncover because the military brass obstructed the investigation at every step. Okay. How big it was, how can you say? If you can, I mean, the Senate has the right to investigate the Army. That's constitutional. Okay. So the Senate has the right to investigate upon charges being made. Whether they discover anything or not, that's their purpose. If they don't discover anything, that doesn't mean the investigation was wrong, okay? Because the Senate has the right to oversee the Army, okay? But the military brass shouldn't have tried to obstruct the investigation by moving people around.
Yeah.
And they did find some questionable individuals in that unit. So, you know, this is just one of the many ways they attempt to attack McCarthy. Remember, McCarthy was first a judge, so a judge has to investigate, okay? And as a senator, you are a judge of the land. The Senate actually is the highest court in the land. Most people don't know that. They think it's the Supreme Court. No, it's the Senate, because who impeaches the president? It's the Senate. Only the Senate. The Senate is the highest court in the land. Therefore, you should act inquisitorially when you're investigating. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a virtue. Did he sometimes accuse people who were innocent? Who's to say? We'll get that to the end of how many people were truly innocent that he accused. The media have tried to make it appear that no one he accused was guilty. He made it all up. He was just a vicious, slimy calumniator and smearer of other people. That actually turns out not to be the case. Okay?
Yeah.
Was he rhetorical? The Irish are rhetorical. Okay. Did he hate vice? Of course he did. He was a Catholic. Was he set up against Freemasons, communists, homosexuals, Marxists, and liberals? Of course he was.
Mm-hmm.
And they were. They even admit it today they are. So as a senator, though, you're supposed to investigate. And that means you need to ask hard questions. When you're investigating someone and cross-examining them, you have to ask a question that jostles them, that forces them to say what they really are. For example, yesterday on Twitter, some cardinal made a statement. I pointed out that the cardinal was not consistent with what he was saying because he, in his own personal action, didn't keep up with it.
Yeah.
And and someone said he must be a good cardinal. I said, well, how could he be good if he's serving someone who's evil? So then I said to these two guys, I said, well, did someone who served Hitler, Mao, or Stalin, could he possibly have been a good person? And one of them came and said, of course he could be a good. I said, so you could be a good person and serve Adolf Hitler killing 20 million people. And then they came back and said, well, he was no different than Julius Caesar. And I said, wait a moment, you just compared Hitler, Stalin, and Mao with Julius Caesar. I mean, three men who together killed like 200 million people of their own citizens, to Julius Caesar, who maybe in one political purge he had 5,000 people killed, okay? And you just compared those two. It came out that one of them would said, you should respect all the dead soldiers, even those who took vows to Hitler. So obviously these people are Nazis, okay? They have no morality. They're completely Masonic. As a Catholic order, you should respect all the dead. I blocked him and I said, you're absolutely delusional. In a Catholic order, we don't respect people who took oaths to serve Hitler, Mao, or Stalin. Sorry, that is, you go to hell. If you die as a soldier having sworn an oath to those men, you go to hell. I don't care how good you were, you go to hell, because that's a mortal sin to swear an oath to people like that.
Yeah.
Even if you're a Christian. And if you're not a Christian, you're going to hell anyhow, so. But this is how you reveal it. It's in a tough cross-examination. You get the person to really lay on this table what and this was a person who pretended to be a little boy on a Twitter account, but he's really probably a military vet. He knew all this stuff about history. AJ and I were saying, well, what could he possibly say now? I said he'd have to quote Plutarch, who accused Caesar of killing 1.2 million Gauls. But no one knows that, I said. And what the very next thing he did, he quoted Plutarch. He didn't mention Plutarch, but he quoted the accusation. So I said, this guy is not a little boy. He claims on Twitter to be a little boy. So why is he claiming to be a little boy, but he's actually an adult that knows all this information? I can't say in public what I think about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're all over the place. The dishonesty out there, you can cut it like a cake. It is so deep. And if you're a Catholic, since your God is the truth, Jesus Christ, you just naturally get revolted by this stuff. And this is where the anger of McCarthy came from. He saw dishonesty and he called these people out. And Masonic virtue cannot stand in the light of Catholic truth. It just is shown for what it is.
Yeah. Then the next year, fall, August 1954, the Senate committee was formed to investigate censuring McCarthy. On September 27th, the committee released an anonymous report calling McCarthy's behavior as a committee chairman inexcusable, reprehensible, vulgar, and insulting. On December 2nd, 1954, the full Senate, by a vote of 67 to 22, passed a resolution condemning McCarthy for abusing his power as a senator. Though he remained in the Senate, McCarthy now had little power, was ignored by the Congress, the White House, and most of the media.
Okay, so you read a rather accurate history, because I thought you were going to say they voted to censure him, because in the Wikipedia article it says they voted to censure him, and you've all heard that McCarthy is one of the few senators that was censured. Well, that's a lie, because the article they voted was to condemn him. The word censure wasn't in it. So that is complete lie to say that he was censured, okay? So he was voted to condemn. Now, what did they start this committee to censure him for? They did actually form a committee to censure him. And they did prepare a text that had the word censure in it, but it was struck out. And they accused him of falsely accusing people and exaggerating charges and calling people names and treating and railroading people by false investigations. Those are the accusations. And this is exactly what the committee did, because the committee charged him with 46 ethics violations. And after a long investigation of 2 years, they found him guilty in only 2 of 46. Now let's read the 2 he was found guilty on. The first one is he failed to cooperate with subcommittee rules, meaning, you rock the boat.
Yeah.
Subcommittee rules aren't a law, okay? They're not even a law. They're just a normal way of operating. Do you have to always go by those? But if you misuse them to corrupt the system, why should you obey them? Okay, so here's a Catholic, and he understands that these are pharisaical rules, and maybe sometimes he didn't cooperate with them. Do you get censured for that? I'm sure there's every single senator in the Senate has violated subcommittee rules at some time in his life. Was he censured for it? Certainly not. So the first charge is completely made up and false. You don't get censure someone for not following subcommittee rules. The second charge is even more ridiculous. The second charge is to censure McCarthy for claiming that this committee is out to railroad him. So 46 charges, 45 of which were railroad, and the 5th one is we finding you guilty for claiming that we're railroading you when we were railroading you. So we've seen the same thing against Trump in Congress, in the House. All these investigations, in the end, there's nothing to them. And yet they still try to censure Trump for some minor thing, for resisting our investigation. So if you recognize that Trump was railroaded in the House, then you should recognize that McCarthy was also railroaded. And the whole anti-McCarthy histories, all the ones you read, is complete propaganda from the communist, Marxist, Masonic, and homosexual left, okay? Complete. Except on this resolution to censor McCarthy, half of the Republicans in the Senate stabbed him in the back, just like half the Republicans in the Republican Party stabbed Trump in the back. With this one exception, now so you can, I've just made a comparison between McCarthy and Trump, but I just want to point out, McCarthy would have condemned Trump for having been married 3 times and supporting gay marriage. He would have completely condemned him. Okay, so it's the same hate, but now it's directed against someone who's even more pro-Masonic, pro-Marxist than McCarthy ever was.
Yeah.
And so we can see just from this Senate action to censor McCarthy that it was complete railroad. And therefore, McCarthy was utterly innocent. Because if they, after 2 years, couldn't find anything to fault him on in ethics, that means he was spotless.
Mhm.
He was absolutely honest in everything he did. And you can't claim as a senator that another senator can't criticize you in public. You're a public official. And if your behavior is worth criticism in his judgment, he has the right to criticize you. He has the duty constitutionally to criticize you because he represents the people, and the people of the country have the right to know whether your behavior is worthy of praise or worthy of vilification.
Mhm.
So this justifies everything. The funny thing is after the Wikipedia article talks about the censure, they actually entitle it Censure and the Watkins Committee. They point out he would, at the very end of it, he was never censured because the word censure is not in it. Then in the next section, the very first sentence is after his condemnation and censure, but you just told me the word censure is not in it. So they won't let go of the word censure, even though they admit it's complete.
Oh, all right. We're having a little technical difficulties here, folks. Uh, happens every time we touch on too much truth. Oh, we haven't even got to the big stuff yet, folks. Oh, Senator Joseph McCarthy died. Oh, we get him back in here, folks.
I was censured. You know, you're being listened to when the line always breaks at a crucial moment,
Mhm.
every single time. It never breaks when we're talking about, toiletries or something minor, what's the next program? It's always during a Catholic criticism of the Masonic order. They just couldn't take what I said. I guess the person listening to us, grandfather, must have been accused. I should say great uncle must have been accused of something by McCarthy. I say great uncle, not grandfather, because he didn't have any kids. That's all I'll need to say. I'll be censured again. You notice how they caught me just with my hands in the air to make me look like, I was a radical.
Yeah,
So this just confirmed that what I was saying is 100% truth. They can't even bear it to be transmitted.
yeah. I was like, hold on, folks. We're having technical difficulties here, but we haven't even touched the big stuff yet.
No, let's go. Okay.
How was he killed?
Yeah. McCarthy was I can't say he was murdered, but it pretty looks like he was murdered. So he's an Irishman. He Irish like drinking, so that's not anything unusual with an Irishman. Irishmen are often called drunkards because they drink a lot and have a habit of drinking a lot, but that doesn't mean they're a drunkard. Okay. So the head of the Federal Narcotics Bureau found out that for certain health problems he ended up dying of sclerosis of the liver. He was taking morphine because of the pain. So what did they do? He had his agents give McCarthy morphine paid with the US taxpayer money in the narcotics office to make him a morphine addict. He didn't even tell the agents who they were giving the drugs to, and they made him a morphine addict so that he would die young. Head of the Federal Narcotics Bureau using narcotics to kill a US senator, a sitting US senator. Okay, so was it murder? Who's to say what happened? He died he never was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver. When he dies at Bethesda, he died at Bethesda Hospital. That's the diagnosis the military gave him. No other autopsy was done. We have no more evidence of the fact. Was he murdered? If I was a betting man, having seen he was just railroaded in the Senate for doing nothing, I would say yes, he was murdered. How does the head of the Federal Narcotics Bureau start feeding morphine to a US senator with secret agents to make him an addict?
And who was his friends? And he's a godfather to Robert Kennedy's child.
First son, yeah. Well, at least according to the family, he was a godfather. There's someone else's on the certificate. Yeah, he was close friends to the Kennedys. So he was close friends to John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, who both get assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
Now, 3 people who were both killed, who all opposed communists in the US government, you know, 2 would be a coincidence. So America has a much darker history. It's a very, very dark history. And all 3 of them were targeted with assassination. And this was, so McCarthy dies in what, 58, 56?
Yeah.
And Kennedy's assassinated in 63. Mm-hmm. And John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy is what, I think 67. So all in the space of a decade, 3 prominent Catholic politicians murdered, assassinated because they opposed the Masonic order. John Kennedy, if most people don't know, he died within like 6 weeks after he said the Masonic Lodge would be removed from the military bases. And it has now been proven that the people who assassinated him were a CIA hit squad that was supposed to be targeting to assassinate Fidel Castro in Cuba. But they were used for assassinating a sitting Catholic president. So don't think you're living in a friendly country, that America loves Christians. The government we have in Washington is anti-Christian, is out to destroy us. And if in the lockdown and in the Black Lives Matter anti-rots, you haven't yet realized that the federal government, the Masonic Lodge, is out to destroy Christian America, you're smoking weed. That's why in our first meeting of the Christian Party of America, we had 2 government agents listening in, because they're out to destroy Christian America. They're considering us the enemy. They won't do it in the open broad light by declaring war on us, because then they'd know we'd rise up and we defeat them, okay? They do it secretly, by picking you off the night, like running you over with a car, running Patton off the road. We did a show on Patton. Patton was assassinated by the CIA, by military ops. He was assassinated because they knew he would beat Eisenhower. They knew he would defeat Eisenhower and win the presidency. Now, Patton wasn't a Catholic, okay, but he was a staunch anti-communist, okay? And what did Eisenhower do? Eisenhower, when he was running for the presidency, got McCarthy to campaign for him in Wisconsin. No sooner did he get elected, he stabbed McCarthy in the back and started undermining him. And Eisenhower let all kinds of communists into the US government. He was a 2-faced piece of trash. And he wanted to support collaboration with the communists while not appearing it. And he was the one that allowed the military industrial establishment to get final and complete control over the US government. He's also the one that allowed Dulles to recruit into the CIA all the Nazi agents and to overthrow the government of Iran and Guatemala, and perhaps even the Vatican in the election of '58. We talked about that in our show on the Siri thesis. So we're not talking about an innocent America here. We're talking about a very evil group running our government that does not represent the people of the United States and needs to be removed from power. Otherwise, they're going to exterminate us. One by one, they'll pick us off.
Yep. Which is why we need to remove ourselves from the Republican Party and toss the Democrat Party into the trash and build up the Catholic Party of America.
If you don't have people who truly are loyal to Christ ruling you, representing you, you're prey for wolves. The Masonic Lodge has the purpose of destroying Christianity. So if you vote for anyone in a Masonic party, you're voting someone who's going to destroy you. He might smile nicely and tweet nicely, but he's out to destroy you. Okay, so you're not going to make America great again unless you make America Christian again. And the Constitution we have is anti-Christian. The ruling parties we have are anti-Christian. The Masonic Lodge is anti-Christian. Most people don't know that the Masonic Lodge was hated by Protestants of the age of the Revolution. And there was such a strong anti-Masonic movement in the United States that in the 1820s, the state of Connecticut outlawed the Masonic Lodge. And that's why the Masonic Lodge at Yale University is called Skull and Bones, it's not called Masonic Lodge. And Skull and Bones, who was a member of Skull and Bones? Both Bushes, Bill Clinton, and a lot of other people that are running our country. So the Protestants were once strongly anti-Masonic. Now, if you're a Protestant, you're listening to our show, is your church anti-Masonic today, or has it buckled to the lodge? And if you read all the satanic things they're involved in, you realize that as a Christian, my church should be opposed. And if my church is not opposed to it, my church is no longer Christian. They're in a league with Satan, okay? And this is not a joke, okay? The boogeyman in North America is not the papist, okay? Not the Roman Catholic. The boogeyman is the Masonic Lodge. And I won't even mention Bergoglio because he's a Freemason, so don't think he's a Catholic either. We don't think he's a Catholic. We know he's not a Catholic. His own intelligence agent says he's a Freemason, so. That's the enemy of Christianity, and we need an anti-Masonic party. And what better than a Christian party? And this is what we need for America. And the history of McCarthy, like the history of the life of the Patton, it's a tragedy. Both were great men who gave everything to serve our country, and both were destroyed by the enemies of America in the deep state. And the deep state includes both parties. Because you can see that McCarthy was betrayed both by Republicans and Democrats. There were some Democrats and some Republicans that didn't betray him, like the Kennedys and the Republicans that didn't vote to censor him. But the majority went after him. So if you think Eisenhower's a great man, you need to unpack your history and realize that he was a complete fraud. He was an enemy to America. I won't even point out that the actual member of the Kennedy family who was picked by the grandfather to run for political office, the older brother of John Kennedy, he was assigned by the U.S. Air Force at the last moment on a dangerous mission in 1943, and he was shot out of the sky and killed. And there was no reason for him to be on that flight. The order came down from Washington to put him on that flight and put him on in a dangerous run and then leave his plane undefended so he'd be killed. So they knew who their enemy was, and they assassinated, let's say, I have just 4 people assassinated by the Masonic Lodge there. 4. Okay. 2, we know that they're assassinated, everyone says. The other 3, Patton, they don't claim he's assassinated, but the evidence is coming out that he was assassinated. We know that because your grandfather worked on Patton's car. I knew that the car had nothing wrong with it. Okay. Kennedy's older brother, and now McCarthy. 5 men assassinated by the Masonic Lodge so that they could maintain power in America.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could add even Reagan to that, because that guy who shot Reagan, who almost killed him,
Mm-hmm.
was intentionally let out of a mental facility, intentionally let out, and given a gun when he shouldn't have been able to get a gun. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the Democrats are always saying, "Oh, all these gun laws," but their people always end up with them in the hands when they need them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just absolutely amazing. So I'm not anti-American. I'm anti-Masonic Lodge, and and to be a member of the Christian Party, you're not anti-American. You're pro-American, and
Mm-hmm.
you're not taking over America for Christianity. You're taking it back.
Yep.
Taking it back. This is counter-revolution. This isn't a revolution. Because as I said, the men who died to free America were all Christians, and they would have never agreed to what we have today. Never.
Yeah. It would be. I could just see them if our Lord would allow them to walk the streets again. They come. You think Antifa would be violent?
They would be reproaching us for sitting in our houses, especially those of you who have guns and not coming out to defend your town. And they wouldn't wait to defend their town. They'd go to the state capitol and clean it out. If you told them you had to pay 18% income tax, then you're paying 3% tax on your property for your house, and then you're paying $500 a year on your car, and you're paying taxes on your tractor, and you're paying taxes on your crops, and you're paying 6% tax every time you buy something, they would
Mm-hmm.
take up the gun and say, point me to town hall, I'm going to go shoot everyone. They wouldn't have stand for it. So we
Yeah.
have, by the Masonic Lodge, we have been subjected to slavery that's 1,000 times worse than the fathers of the revolution were subjugated to the King of England.
Mm-hmm.
1,000 times worse. If you want to measure it mathematically, it's 1,000 times worse. And you're supposed to be peaceful and accept that. That's insane? That's insanity. Why should we accept subjection to a godless Masonic satanic lodge in place of subjection to a half-batty Anglican British king
Yeah.
who in his morals was probably more Catholic than all the Catholic bishops in the United States
Mm-hmm.
are today.
Yeah.
Because the bishops in the United States are not Catholic anymore. They're all Masonic. Just pay no attention to anything they say. The other day they had a prayer against racism. They don't even accept the gospel teaching that capital punishment is morally acceptable. So they're not even Christian anymore. They're some kind of pagan sect
Yeah.
of pedophiles and pedophile protectors. So America is going to pot. Christians have to gather together and save it. That's our duty. Christ loves our country, and that is our duty to save our country and take back America for Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And what a funeral Joseph McCarthy got.
Yeah, tell us, what kind of funeral did you get? Tell everyone.
Let's see, the Pontifical High Requiem Mass with how many priests were involved?
100 priests, thousands of faithful, and that was at St. Matthew's Cathedral in D.C. And then he got another funeral back in Wisconsin. He's buried in Wisconsin, and the Catholics came out and said this and showed this was a really honest man. But you know, I've never heard a priest in my lifetime praise McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because he was not only against communists, he was against the lavender infiltration of the church and of the state. And if he knew what was going on today, he would have said, I told you so, you should have listened to me.
Yep. That was in the 50s. 50s, folks. And these tradies want to go back to the 50s.
Yeah, do they want to go back to the 50s of McCarthy or of the people who opposed McCarthy? That shows you that the whole thing, go back to the 50s, is just opposition control.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a year. You don't go back to a certain year. You go back to the Christian faith in everything. Fidelity to Christ is what saves the country, not the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so in the 50s we saw already in action the complete Masonic control of government, the complete Marxist control of the press, all the tactics from Murrow's news program to the smear tactics of the entire mass media. We see the same mechanisms. It hasn't changed a bit. The only difference is they've already destroyed our culture, our morals, our laws, and our politics, and reduced it to a completely debased moral state. And that's the only difference, but it's the same enemy within, and until it's removed, and it will never be removed by either the Democrat or Republican Party, because they are the enemies within. They are.
Yep. Everything McCarthy supported, the Catholic Party of America supports. And we would make sure everything gets cleaned out.
Like McCarthy has a great quote: "Our country won't be safe until communism is completely eradicated from the face of the earth."
Mm-hmm.
Only a Catholic would say that.
Yep.
And we could add, "America won't be safe until the Masonic Lodge is completely eradicated from the face of the earth."
Mm-hmm.
And we could add, humanity won't be safe until the globalists and the homosexual agenda people, their political organizations, are completely eradicated from the face of the earth.
Yep.
You cannot have organized, perverse politics. That's a mafia. It's called a political mafia. And the mafia, we can add the mafia. The mafia doesn't even rise to the level of these people's perversion. So.
Yeah. And let's get this. Oh yeah. And tomorrow we're gonna give you another man who became Catholic.
A great hero of the West, and
Mm-hmm.
a dentist from Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
Doc Holliday.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to tell you his life and what the Georgia politics were like back then, and get the stage set for how everything changed once the Civil War hit.
Mm-hmm.
So tune in for tomorrow's show about Doc Holliday, the first episode about Doc Holliday. And you'll learn a lot that you don't hear about anymore. So
Thank you, AJ, for having me on this program about Senator McCarthy. I think it's a great program. Every Catholic should share and hear this program. We need to set the historic record straight, and you're not going to hear it but from Catholics. And we are not right-wing Catholics, and we're not left-wing Catholics. We are Catholic. Okay, so.
yep. And if you like what we do with our shows, you want a better style with, okay.
Excuse me. I just said, we were going to talk about one thing in our program, and I totally forgot it. I just, as a footnote now, once they got all the files of the KGB were published, they found out that more than 90% of everyone that McCarthy accused was in fact a KGB agent or operative.
Mm-hmm.
So he was right about everything.
Yeah.
That's a footnote.
Yeah. So if you like what we do with these shows, telling you history not taught in school, and about the faith, and restoring Christian politics, please become your monthly subscriber or one-time donor to Order Militaris Radio TV. All the funds go into getting new equipment, and we don't take a salary. No one gets a salary. You can go to ordl-militaris.net, and you can click any of the show pages. Scroll down, you'll see make a free will monthly subscription. Then it'll ask you want one time, you want it to be one time or monthly. Take your pick and follow the steps to finish it through. And thank you for those two who are doing monthly pledges, and thank you to those who've done the single one-time donations. Please keep it up, and and tune in tomorrow for Doc Holiday. This is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.